cough. And in those days, if you began nodding out during the lecture, what you would do is stand up because you can't fall asleep on your feet, theoretically. But there were a couple of devotees. I can't give any names because this is being recorded. This one devotee in particular used to fall asleep on his feet. He'd start leaning forward. He was, we had a marble floor. We didn't want him to hit the floor, but anyway, so it's difficult sometimes to listen to some person give a long talk about Krishna consciousness. Anyways, here we are once again. This is Mahayogi Prabhu reporting live from a secure, undisclosed location deep in the heart of Mexico, where we're currently in the rainy season, and we're discussing Sri Guru and his grace. But it's been a while since I gave a formal reading, and I can't remember exactly what page we're on. And I know the person who would know about this would be Pranashish, probably. Exactly where my marker is, you think? Could be. I remember, the Krishna consciousness movement has taught me so many things. We lived in this temple in Laguna Beach for a while, and our temple commander was Agnidev Prabhu, who's renowned for his mridanga playing in kirtan. He made a great uh, plantain soup with some recipe from Trinidad, which is where he was from. And one day he gave me a wristwatch, and I said, "Oh, well, thank you very much. I thought we were to shun all material possessions. When I joined the temple, I gave up my wristwatch. Why are you giving me a wristwatch?" And he said, "This is so you can see how much of Krishna's time you are wasting." And he gave me all kinds of good advice. So I said, sometimes when we're out on book distribution, we're in a very materialistic place like a shopping center, and sometimes there's nothing to do. That's my microphone. What should we do? And he said, "You can read the book you're just." See, this is my microphone. It just fell off. "You can read the book you're distributing." Well, this, yeah. And so, we were distributing at that time the fourth canto of the Bhagavatam. I'll just hold it like this. You know, we were distributing the fourth canto of the Bhagavatam, and it was sort of an arcane discussion about Dhruva Maharaj that was difficult to really follow. And so I said, well, Agnidev, as I'm reading this, I get lost, and I don't really have to do this. I'm not quite able to follow the argument because if I'm reading about Dhruva Maharaj and then some housewives come out of the shopping center, I can distribute books again. And then there's another fallow period where nothing is going on. It's hard for me to maintain the flow. How can I do that? And he said, well, there's a very easy solution that I will now impart to you. Okay, I think I can do this. We're back. I used to work on a radio station. I know how to do it. He said, yeah, I understand. Say you're reading the Bhagavatam, and you lose your place. You have to do something else and come back to the book. He said, I have a solution for you. And he gave me a bookmark. He said, put the bookmark in the place in the book and mark your place. And this way you can come back to it later. And I thought, wow, he's a genius. This is a really wise man I have gig with. So yeah, I did in fact mark my place in but I can't remember reading this. Everything Srila Guru Maharaj says is really deep, heavy, concentrated truth that you can contemplate whether you're a new devotee or an experienced sannyasi acharya after 30 years. All right, well, we come to sort of a controversial part of this book. A devotee asks Srila Sridhar Maharaj, in our spiritual master's lifetime, he was seen as the absolute authority above all, including our governing body commission. How should we understand the position of the new spiritual masters and their relationships with their god brothers and disciples? So this is a very potent question. It gets to the heart of many of our day-to-day relationships and problems. Of course, the devotees, he's referring to A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And, in our spiritual master's lifetime, he was seen as the absolute authority above all. But this could just as easily refer to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur or Srila Sridhar Maharaj himself or Govinda Maharaj or subsequent uh, iterations, if you like, of the Āchārya. And there's Adwai. Hi, Adwai. It's good to see you. Thank you for joining us. We're at the heart of this book, Sri Guru and His Grace, and we've come to the heart of the question. In our spiritual master's lifetime, he was seen as the absolute authority above all, including our governing body commission. How should we understand the position of the new spiritual masters and their relationships with their god brothers and disciples? So Srila Sridhar Maharaj answers. He says, well, the position of the Āchārya with his disciples must be absolute. With his disciples, he will have absolute authority. Still, he must be careful not to become mad with authority. Authority is a part of pratishta, name and fame. There is another tendency. When a guru comes in connection with vatsalya rasa, the mood of guardianship over his disciples, his friendly relation with his godbrothers decreases. Some special discrimination arises, and stealthily, he is drawn to his disciples, indifferently neglecting his connection with his godbrothers. This tendency is sure to come, and it is difficult to keep up the balance. So the brothers are neglected and the sons get more attention. In this way, the guru becomes partial. When he comes in close connection with their disciples, they have freedom he is given an opportunity of absolute mastership. In that position, it is very difficult to keep up his purity because of that temptation. There is the possibility of going down from the plane of Āchārya. I think this is a question worth discussing because I would like some insight on it. You know, after all, I'm all alone over here. Subhasini is surrounded by all kinds of Vaishnavas and devotees there in London. Pranashish, you have your in-depth experience over hundreds and thousands of years, lifetimes, kalpas. And of course, there's Adwai, who joined the mission at an early age. So I just wonder, I don't like being put in the position of having to explain everything, reflect on everything. Maybe you can help me out a little bit with your own personal perspective. I'll read this again. The position of the Acharya with his disciples must be absolute. Well, what do you think about that? Is that true? Let's try it, Pranashish. Sit up straight.
Okay, well, if absolute is absolute, then it's eternally absolute, which means it's always bigger and bigger and bigger. So yes, we can say that the relationship must have a glimpse of the absolute view in it. And let's just say that is the truth. So the truth is absolute. So I'm giving you that truth. Okay.
Can you give an example of a teacher and a disciple where that works out to be true?
Well, the only one we've seen is with Srila Govinda Maharaj and his guru, Srila Sridhar Maharaj. But I suppose that was a long time coming, and everybody knew it was coming. But no,
Right.
but yeah,
So, yeah, Srila Sridhar spent a long time training Govinda Maharaj. When he arrived at the mat, he said, this man will be my successor. And he spent, you could argue, a lifetime. Even Govinda Maharaj may have resisted that at some point. But in the end, he fulfilled that promise. So there's an example. Yeah. Adwai. I'm just curious to hear someone else's point of view. Can you help me out? What do you think
Well,
about
it's. I think the fact of the acharya, the position of the guru being absolute, is especially, I don't know, important in modern institutions, in the sense that in the institutions you have temples, you have the president of the temple and the responsible for this and responsible for that, but above everything is the relationship between the guru and the disciples, and nobody can get into that relationship. I don't know if you get what I mean.
Right. Okay. He says he will have absolute authority. I think also there may be some confusion in the West as to how that absolute authority plays into someone's life in the following sense. I don't think that in India, the guru is not worshipped as Jesus Christ. You know, we don't think we don't think that the guru is a man god. We think that he's a teacher and that divinity passes through him and he's worthy of all respect. And in that sense, absolute. But if the guru begins to abuse his authority, saying, well, I'm the absolute authority, I want, money, fame, women, drugs, at some point we can understand this is not correct. Am I right on that, Sivasani? How do you think people see the guru in India as opposed to in the West?
I think they will think us like you know guru is the one who is connecting you with the Lord. It's like taking us his representative. That is what as far as I understand, is, who takes brings you in connection with the Supreme, and is seen as well. He is actually being worshipped, but also not as like a God, but as like giving all, but given all respect to as a as one.
Because the question here is, say we all go to the same school, we all go to the same gurukul with the same guru, right? And one of us emerges as a teacher. Then if you come to visit while, say, Pranashish takes 1,000 disciples and Adwai goes to visit him, what will be the attitude? How will Adwai be respected? If he says, oh yeah, I remember Pranashish when he used to sell incense on the streets of Calcutta, and he said this and that, that may be construed as some kind of disrespect, and his 1,000 disciples may take umbrage at that. And this is sort of the thing that we're discussing here. He
But
says
if
when it,
privately, but maybe in privately, they will have still maintain that friendship that with his god brother, isn't it? They will have that same the respect and the friendship, mutual respect with the god brothers, but maybe not in front of his disciples. That's is
okay, so in front of the disciples, then one would be very respectful, but behind closed doors, uh, you could give a friendly slap to your old god brother, something like that. All right. So I'll read this again. He says, still he must be careful not to become mad with authority. Because if you take it outside our tradition and Gaudiya Vaishnavism and just talk about other different persons who represent themselves as divine teachers of some sort, we will see examples of people who represent themselves as Jesus Christ or as Krishna and sit on a gold throne surrounded by women who offer them money and gold and things like that. So he says authority is a part of pratishta, name and fame. When a guru comes in connection with Vatsalya rasa, the mood of guardianship over his disciples, his friendly relation with the godbrothers decreases, some special discrimination arises, and stealthily he is drawn to his disciples. So the brothers are neglected, the sons get more attention, and in this way the guru becomes partial. I think we've seen this. And then he says, in that position, it is very difficult to keep up his purity because of that temptation. There's the possibility of going down from the plane of Āchārya. So if someone is surrounded by too much adoration, one may begin to believe, oh, they're worshiping me as God himself. Perhaps I really am. And that's a very dangerous place to be, because by accepting too much adoration, there's the possibility of going down from the plane of Āchārya. Srila
Maharaj.
yeah.
Now, it's sometimes also I think there's the problem that when that relationship develops between the guru and the disciples, sometimes what happens is that there's that very close relationship in a way, and it's familiar. So the guru might say many things, and some of the things that he says, they might be very relative, but the disciples might be not very qualified and they take them as absolute. And then there can be the clash between the guru's god brothers and the disciples of the guru, because he might say, I think we saw that happening, and that's always a problem. I don't know if you get what I mean.
Yeah. So say you're having a conversation with again, Pranashish and his 1,000 disciples, and you're being respectful. And you ask Pranashish, you think it's going to rain today? And Pranashish, no, I don't think it's going to rain. And you say, based on my intelligence, I think it's going to rain. And then the disciples, later on in the day, it rains. And the disciples go to Pranashish and they say, Adwai said it was going to rain. And Pranashish says, you don't have to listen to him. What does he know? And that gets recorded. And then 50 years later, somebody's transcribed that recording and publishes it in a book. And then, and then it comes out, Adwai now has his disciples, and it comes out in a book saying, Pranashish, in his conversation in 2025, he says, what does Adwai know? He doesn't know anything, And so when Adwai talks about the cosmology of the Bhagavatam, it was clearly stated by Pranashish in 2020 in that transcript. He said, what does he know? So yeah, we run the risk that the disciples may take everything very, very seriously because they feel that, well, the guru's word is absolute. I am not a Catholic, but I live close to it. I live 100 meters from a Catholic church, and they're always ringing their bell, and I know something about it. In that tradition, they came to some decision about the Pope, the Holy Father, who runs the Catholic Church. And they said, well, is his word infallible? This was a big question. And they decided that, well, the word of the Holy Father is infallible in certain circumstances, not in every circumstance. So if he swears, I don't know, I can't remember exactly what the rules are. If he makes a papal bull, if he swears on a stack of Bibles and he's surrounded by bishops wearing his gold ring, and he says, this commandment is always to be respected, then that will be infallible. But if he's saying these red socks are not properly scarlet, there should be more red in my socks, that may not be infallible. Because on the internet, I see people publish transcripts of tape recordings from Srila Prabhupada, and you can see his flow is not that of one who is writing a book, but it's that of somebody who's walking down the street and being careful to cross the street properly. And they'll ask him some questions about politics or the universe. And according to the way he's been transcribed, his answer seems to ramble. He goes from one topic to the next and back to the first topic, and it seems ambiguous or unclear. I don't think that when he was speaking like that. He felt this will be recorded for all eternity, and it will be considered law forever. I think he felt that way about his books, perhaps. But so this is the problem. The brothers are neglected and the sons get more attention. In this way, the guru becomes partial. When he comes in close connection with their disciples, they have freedom. He's given an opportunity of absolute mastership. So, for example, Prabhupada in the 1970s, they asked him about the World War. And they said, what's up with the World War, Prabhupada? And he said, well, I see that India has the bomb and Pakistan has the bomb, and they don't like each other. And there's a real conflict there. And the United States, they tend to like Pakistan, and Russia, they tend to like India. So maybe there'll be a proxy war. And immediately the devotees went out and bought survival suits and constructed bomb shelters under the earth and began preaching World War III in the Bhagavatam class. I sat through many, I won't mention the names of the swamis who gave those classes, but I sat through many Bhagavatam classes where that was offered as some divine truth. Now, when that was presented before Srila Sridhar Maharaj, of course, he famously said, what is war? It's a point, it's a line on a point. A point is infinitesimal. It has no dimension, but you can extend a number of points infinitely along a line. And so you discover another kind of infinity. The point itself is a kind of infinity. It's infinitesimal. The line is infinite. Extend the line and you have a plane which is infinite. Extend the plane and you have a three-dimensional space which is infinite. Extend the space through time and you have an infinite time and eternity. So, what is, does this, in the end, what's the destruction of humanity? It's not germane to the eternal soul, which is apparently an inhumane thing to say. But realistically speaking, if we're discussing eternity, then what is one more explosion or one less explosion? Krakatoa, the volcano east of Java, exploded with the intensity of 10 atomic bombs, I don't know, 150 years ago. We're all still here. So his point was, read not the times, read the eternities, concentrate on what's affecting your eternal soul. Don't get so caught up in the news. And strangely enough, 50 years later, we got the news that India is ready to confront Pakistan. Pakistan wants to confront India. There's the possibility of a nuclear war. But we still have to deal with our own spiritual existential condition apart from that. Death is there for everyone sooner or later. And that's really the big question. When Yudhishthira Maharaj was asked by the Yaksha, what is the most wonderful thing? What's the big question? Yudhishthira Maharaj answered him incorrectly. He said the big question is why people don't take death seriously. They've seen my father died, my mother died, my grandfather died, my friends have died. So I'm going to die. And yet I'm not doing anything about that. I'm worried about my FedEx shipment, or how am I going to pay my taxes, or I have to go to the dentist this morning. These are my big worries. But the big question is the one of immortality, eternity, not the world war. So there must be a distinction made between when the Āchārya speaks and his word may be taken as infallible or deep, worth considering for years and years. And when his expression may be of a more temporal nature, I think. All right, so guru is all in all. Autocracy and democracy do not go well together. Our system is autocratic. But Srila Sridhar has explained again and again, this is a kind of dichotomy, this interesting conflict going on between society consciousness and God consciousness. And this is true even within a religious mission, because the point of a mission is to have a society. So how the devotees relate to one another as God brothers, as God nephews, as God's sons, how we maintain the integrity of the spiritual mission. In a sense, this is a societal concern, whereas each individual bhakta has his own spiritual path that he has to walk. So, given the needs of the mission and the society, it must be autocratic and it must be led by someone. Guru is all in all. Our submission to Guru is unconditional. If a disciple sees that his guru's powers are being restricted by other Vaishnavas, it will create a great disturbance in his mind, a disturbance to his absolute faith in his guru. This is where the Krishna conception of Godhead comes to our relief. When Srila Sridhar says the Krishna conception comes to our relief, he means, God is not this absolute force or power which is impersonal, but it's very dynamic. The Supreme Personality of Godhead carries on a number of dynamic relationships with different associates and different mellows or rasas. This is where the Krishna conception of Godhead comes to our relief. He whom we think to be supreme most, Krishna, Yashoda is whipping him. So you have to consider, well, he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but here's Yashoda. She's whipping him. What's her position? She must have some position as well. And the problem of accommodating different levels, different kinds of gradations of relationships, this is the beauty of the Krishna conception. He's carrying Nanda's shoes on his head, and he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this way, we can adjust everything. Both the absolute faith and the relative position of the non-absolute, these two things should be harmonized. That's really good. Both the absolute faith and the relative position of the non-absolute, these two things should be harmonized. Now, if you're living in the ashram with, so-and-so Maharaj, and he says, all right, I need you to go out and wash all the rain boots that the devotees are using to work in the garden. You wash the mud off the boots. And you think, well, who am I? Why do I have to wash the mud off the boots? You do that. I'm not a bootlick man, But if you're in the ashram and your service is to serve what the Swami says, then you do that without any consideration. You don't have to get into trying to harmonize the absolute faith and the relative position of the non-absolute. But lo, these many years nigh since Srila Sridhar Maharaj is no longer with us, Govinda Maharaj is no longer with us, then it falls to us as the senior men to reflect on these things when someone comes to us and says, well, this is going on. How do we reconcile that? Someone has formed a Hare Krishna rock band, and they're playing Hare Krishna rock at a place where people are taking drugs, and eating abominable things. What do you think about that? Is that correct? Well, then it's your turn to try to harmonize the absolute faith and the relative position of the non-absolute. And that's why we have books, and that's why we have a sort of a friendship and Sangha where we can discuss these things. And then if you're really confused, you try to seek out a higher authority who can help you. The guru should be recognized by impartial judgment. This is really powerful and a very dangerous idea in the library of ideas. The guru should be recognized by impartial judgment. It means that it's not enough for someone to declare themselves Āchārya. Someone can come out and say, well, by all rights and means, I have this diploma and I was recognized by so-and-so. And so I am the new master of the mission, and I will take everyone to court to prove it. And once I've proved that in the court, wherever my name appears, it will say, the only Āchārya. Well, it's not really the concept that's being promoted here by Srila Srinivas. She says the guru should be recognized by impartial judgment, which means you will know the guru by his speech, by the way he walks, by the way he talks, and his example, by his experience, by his precept. Everyone thinks, and this always gets me. This is something to really, meditate on. Everyone thinks that his own mother is the most affectionate, right? So there was a famous, very famous Russian painter, impressionist. His name was Chaim Sutin. And his paintings now are worth millions of dollars. But his mother was a prostitute. And to keep Chaim Sutin busy during the day, she would tie him to the bed and give him a bottle of milk half filled with vodka with a rag for him to suck on. And so, he'd be sucking on his vodka rag tied to the bed. And when his mommy came home, he'd be like, Mommy, oh, I'm so happy to see you. Oh, I love you so much. You're the best mommy. So it's natural for everyone to believe that their own mommy is the best mommy. But, they do have awards like the Mother of the Year. And Chaim Sutin's mother never won that award. She abandoned him when he was like 13 years old. So, while every son believes his mother is the best mother in the world, at the same time, there may be an impartial standard. Everyone thinks that his own mother is the most affectionate, but when a comparison is drawn between two mothers to see who is more affectionate, an impartial criterion will be applied. This is called tatastha vichar, an impartial comparison of relative and absolute considerations. So it's all very well and good to announce yourself as the world Āchārya. And this is another thing, if you think about his example about mothers, it doesn't mean that you're not a guru. It doesn't mean that you don't have disciples. It doesn't mean that you have something to teach. See, you might have 2 disciples and something interesting to teach. In a real sense, a case may be made that Govinda Maharaj was the only disciple of Srila Sridhar Maharaj. So maybe he only had 1 disciple, right? But just go out and call yourself the world Āchārya. This is superficial. Any school on the Earth planet can call itself Harvard University, and claim this is the best school in the world. But an impartial judgment, tatastha vichar, an impartial comparison of relative and absolute considerations may be made. When the two are weighed, the absolute calculation will always have the greater value. So we consider then, the person who's running the school across the street may be a good teacher, but we consider Narada Muni to be a better teacher. We consider Vyas to be a better teacher, right? Then there are those who say, well, okay, Srila Prabhupada, he's like Jesus Christ. He's the supreme teacher. And all I need is a direct connection with him. So I will go to someone who represents himself as a follower of Srila Prabhupada, and he will give me a Ritvik initiation. And I will have a direct connection with Srila Prabhupada, which will be reinforced by listening to all these transcripts that were made 50 years ago of his talks on the beach. Well, that's an untenable position. See, we need to have a connection with real living people. Real living people, they're, fragile, frail, imperfect vessels of the truth. So we may be able to get some divine light from them and keep a respectful relationship as far as possible. They may not be, 100% super world acharyas, but who am I to demand that the only person who can teach me must be a super world acharya on the level of Narada Muni? Still, Srila Sri Rama says, when these two things, relative and absolute consideration, are weighed, the absolute calculation will have the greater value. The position of Āchārya then is very intricate. It is very difficult to bring an Āchārya under rule. You see, that is our practical experience. So Srila Sri Rama, as a 90-year-old Āchārya who has 50, 60, 70 years of experience in the Gaudiya Math. He saw, how the Gaudiya Math was created, how they started from a small little mission. It became a big mission with 64 mats around India. It crumbled after the disappearance of his Gurudev Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He created another mission. He saw Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada go to the West and create a giant world mission with thousands of disciples. And then that began to crumble and something new came out of that. When Srila Sri Rama says, this is our practical experience, he's speaking as one who has not only encyclopedic knowledge of the Shastra, but deeply lived spiritual wisdom and vast experience about all different kinds of missions. So when he says, this is our experience, he's being very humble. But at the same time, he's letting you know, I know something about this. The position of Āchārya is very intricate. It is very difficult to bring an Āchārya under rule. You see, that is our practical experience. You please hear and note this. The position of Āchārya is a relative thing, and the position of disciple is also a relative thing, just like the relationship between mother and child, father and son, wife and husband. Although to his godbrothers, a guru will be seen in a relative position, to his disciple, the guru is absolute. So the father example is a good one too. I can say, you know what, Pranashish, my father's tougher than your father. My father can beat your father. If there were a boxing match, he could kick your father's ass. And you'll say, what? What are you talking about? My dad's tougher than your dad. There used to be a commercial for dog food. You know, my dog's better than your dog. So, okay, you know, everyone must feel that way, but still, there may be tatasta vichar. There may be a impartial comparison of relative and absolute considerations. So to adjust between the relative and absolute is a difficult thing. And this is not something that's resolved by reading a book or even reading a book with friends. This is something that takes introspection, you know, self-analysis. What's relative? What's absolute? How does that affect me? Like I said before, we all walk on our own path. Panashish pointed that out to me. He said, why are you so worried about what other people think? You know, walk your own path. And, you know, there's 64 different devotional practices. Not everyone likes the same kind of devotional practice. Srila Sridhar was asked about Archan Vritti versus Sankirtan Vritti. And he said, well, in our line, isn't Sankirtan more important? Somebody asked. He says, really, in the Gaudiya Vaishnava line, we're not so much addicted to Archan as Bhajan. What we do is Bhajan. Archan is more demanding, and it's really more in the line of Ramanuj. It's a much more restricted, careful, it follows careful rules. Whereas Bhajan comes more from the heart. So what exactly is your devotional path? How to walk on that? The guru can help you, but this is not something like a list of rules and regulations that if you follow every rule and every regulation perfectly, you'll get a desired result. That would be karma kanda. You follow the rules, you get this result. But anyways, I don't want to get too far out reading. So to adjust between the relative and absolute is a difficult thing. It is an eternal problem. This, you know, as Srila Sridhar Maharaj used to say, Krishna is a tough nut to crack. You can't just swallow the infinite so easily. And that's why we're not sahajiyas. You know sahajism when you see it. Even in Krishna Lila, there is enmity between Madhurya Rasa and Vatsalya Rasa. But when the absolute consideration comes, both rasas must be included within the fold. I'm trying to think of the name of Devaki's father. Ugrasen, right? I remember reading once that Vasudev, for example, Krishna's nominal father, did not get along with Ugrasen, who was his father-in-law. And I remember thinking, that's interesting. So I don't have to be perfect friends with every devotee. There may be some difference. Maybe I really do not like, when I was a new devotee in the Los Angeles temple, I remember there was a devotee there who had a Southern accent. And for some reason, it got on my nerves. I can't even remember why, but it bothered me the way he spoke, you know, just a superficial reason for not liking someone. And I couldn't come to terms with that. I thought, this is not right. I need to be friends with all the devotees. But then I read that about Ugrasen and Vasudev, and I thought, well, that's possible. I don't need to be friends exactly with absolutely everybody, you know? And so it goes. So you will see, sometimes we'll see other devotees saying things and doing things that we disagree with. But it's not really our place to come in and correct them and say, well, you know what? My guru would never have tolerated this. Because they will come back with, yes, but my guru does. In fact, he likes this and promotes it. Well, but my guru is better than your guru. You know, it gets complicated. And it's strange that the society of devotees is such a small thing, it's such a fragile thing. You know, instead of doing our best to just tear it apart completely with all this dissension, you know, there's some value in promoting harmony. And so I'm a very kind of peace and love kind of guy, come out of the 60s. So I appreciate peace, love, harmony, all that. Well, that's my talk for today. I have to go see the dentist again. You know, I have some kind of a, you know, problem. And teeth are very painful. So, but pain is good because it reminds us, you know, we're fragile, we're in the material world. This can all come to a sudden halt. So I thank all of you very much for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit of reflection on some things that Srila Sri Ramar said a long time ago, and see if those things are still useful and valuable to us today. And thank you for sharing your time with me. I really appreciate it. So Hare Krishna, everybody, and Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaura Haribol, Gaura Haribol, Gaura. Okay.
Mahayogi Prabhu ki jai. Thank you, Mahayogi Prabhu.
Thank
My
you.
dandavat.
See you next time.
Dandavats.